Good evening and welcome to the City Council study session of May 22nd. Tonight's meeting, there will be several presentations regarding the University North Park project, consisting of updates to the Callison RTKL master plan, updates to the CSNL Entertainment District, feasibility study, updates to Dr. Doffenbach's economic impact analysis, and economic impact analysis from the Oklahoma Department of Transportation, Department of Commerce. Also possible amendments to the Norman University North Park project plan to be considered pursuant to the provision of the Oklahoma Local Development Act. I will remind everybody this is a study session. It is a public meeting. It's an open meeting. It's not a public hearing. And we have lots and lots of information that we're going to hear, and we will take questions at the end from the council. So we're going to try to get through all of the information first. So with that, I would like to introduce Guy Patton, who from the OU Foundation, who has some opening remarks.
You bet. Well, first of all, thank you to the council. Thank you, Madam Mayor, for giving us the opportunity to speak on our project tonight. And thank you really for all of your collective efforts to get us to this point this evening. We really look forward to updating our story on the development that we're contemplating in University North Park. I thought I'd spend just a couple of minutes talking about the history of the project very briefly, because we want to get through the presentations, but also kind of introduce the order of things, which you've already done. So as I think most people know, this project really started with the sale of this land known as University North Park in 2003 by the University of Oklahoma to the University of Oklahoma Foundation. And that sale is what funded the finish of the construction of the National Weather Center and really the start of the development of the South Research Campus at the University of Oklahoma. I think that's important because from the very beginning, this project has funded public use, and that National Weather Center wouldn't be possible without that original transaction. Obviously, subsequent to that, we sold south of Rock Creek to a developer, and there's been tremendous development in University North Park since 2006 when that began in earnest. That was the start of the TIF district, TIF 2, and it was really the increased development in that park south of Rock Creek that caused us almost 3 years ago to begin discussions with the city of the creation of a master plan, trying to imagine what that land north of Rock Creek could become, because we were getting increasing inquiry and interest in developing that land from private developers. And we had always made a commitment to the city that we would develop that land as mixed use and with a really thoughtful, or as thoughtful as we could come up with, plan for how to best utilize that land. And so that effort was kicked off about a year and a half ago with Callison RTKL. And that concluded with a presentation of the original master plan to the council September 15th of last year. Since that time, we've received a lot of feedback on that plan. And we've made some adjustments, and you'll hear more about that later today. But we're really, really excited about this project and what it can do, not only to the value of the land and the value of the development and the quality of the development that we can do out in University North Park, but of course the impact that will have on the city in a variety of ways, positive impact, we believe. And so it's in that context and in that vein that the rest of the presentations will occur tonight. The order of events, your council, Emily Pomeroy, will be presenting first. She obviously has been working with staff and with the interested parties and to create a project plan. Then we've asked Jeff Gunning, the principal from RTKL, to present the amended project plan, or excuse me, master plan. So it's a little bit different than what you saw in September. And then Jay Leinhardt from Convention Sports and Leisure will present the findings from the feasibility study for the arena specifically, and it's inclusive of the entertainment district, as you suggested, Mayor Miller, around that area. And then Bob Doffenbach and John Chappie will present economic impact, a little bit different flavors of those two things. And so, as you said, I think we're going to try and get through the materials as quickly as possible so we can leave as much time as possible for questions at the very end. So with that, I'll ask Emily to come up.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. I'm Emily Pomeroy. I am Development Counsel to the City of Norman and have been engaged to look at the proposed University North Park project and analyze how the existing TIF and any additional TIFs might be used to help make this project happen, should that be a decision that the council makes. My review of the information has led me to believe that this is a project that the city should strongly consider. You'll hear in some more detail in a little bit the Callison RTKL master plan. You've of course seen it before, but you'll see it again in detail tonight. It contemplates the development of a mixed-use entertainment district that includes an arena and a parking garage for the use of the entertainment district in the arena, and some of the office components that are contemplated for the build out of the north. It includes a large-scale residential component, which again, you'll see in more detail in a little bit. It is a $550 million plus investment here in the city of Norman in this area, largely north of Rock Creek Road and University North Park, creating a new neighborhood, a new market creation that doesn't currently exist in the city of Norman, and something worth your consideration. So there's some strangeness happening on the layout of the slides, so that might be more impactful as we move forward. Forgive me for that. Some of the strong components that this project brings to Norman are, beyond the tangible improvements that might be built. The creation of a new residential development really provides the impetus to the city of Norman to retain some of its young professionals that are leaving Norman. I know that's something that the city has been looking closely at, and as a study is being undergone right now to explore how those problems can be addressed. I believe this is one of the many solutions that is available to the city. Again, you'll hear more about the impacts from Professor Doffenbach and Mr. Chappie. So in working with you over the last several months, it's been the input that's been given to me has emphasized a few key points, and I've taken these very seriously and endeavored to incorporate them in the proposed project that we're about to examine. This is a large project, so there is a consideration of completing the original project goals from the project plan in 2006. But there is also a strong consideration to reduce overall project costs as much as possible, but still in a way that will allow for the project to move forward, should that be what the city decides to do. Another key important point that I have endeavored to enhance strongly is maximizing returns to both the city and the affected taxing jurisdictions. As you know, the TIF district has played a large role in the funds available to Norman Public Schools. That's an important point that I think needs to be front and center as we look to how this project can impact all of the community. And again, it does no good to approve a project that won't allow the arena, the entertainment district, and the parking garage to succeed. So if it's the decision of the city council that they want to see those things happen, we need to put in place a structure that will actually allow for it to be financed. So point number one that we've endeavored to incorporate into this amended project plan deals with the immediate relief to the general fund. We are proposing in an amendment an allocation change that is currently in the project plan at 40% to the city and 60% to the project, with some changes for the transfer adjustment that allow more to go to the city. What we're proposing for fiscal years 2019 through 2023 is a change in that allocation where 80% goes to the city, 20% goes to the project. And this is to address very straightforward and head-on the issues that the city's been discussing now for quite some time about its budget. We believe that the project can actually occur with this front-end infusion to the city's general fund. And so that's our recommendation. As you can see here, that is an increase of $2 million between fiscal year 2018 and fiscal year 2019. And that provides a significant buffer, particularly when looking at the budget, which I know you're going to be talking about more later tonight. So that's the immediate revenue picture for the city. But the project overall continues to provide significant benefits to the city's general fund. These are some averages. You have a spreadsheet in your packet that details these annually and what those look like on a year-to-year basis. Of course, in 2031, when TIF 2 ends, there would be an influx of an estimated $12.65 million. That's for 2032. We've just continued that on through the life of the project, though that $12.6 million will continue to grow as sales continue to increase throughout TIF 2. These are just incremental revenues that I've spoken to so far. So you'll please note also that these do not include Norman forward sales taxes and Norman public safety sales taxes and all of the other sales taxes that will be generated throughout the community that are not inside the TIF district. We project that $22.4 million will be generated in Norman forward. So an important point that was on my second slide was also to maximize returns to the affected taxing jurisdictions. And that's what this information is meant to show. The impact on Norman Public Schools is enormous and undeniable. That's largely because the funds, when provided as a TIF allocation, do not go through the state aid formula. So they are not reduced by nearly 74%. They go straight to the Norman Public Schools, dollar for dollar. Impact on Cleveland County is $9.5 million through the new project. And again, that does not include the amount that would go to the affected taxing jurisdictions upon the termination of TIF 2 in 2031. So for example, to Cleveland County, that's an additional $4.7 million. So turning now to this idea of trying to decrease project costs to allow for an overall project to happen. We are proposing that an amount of $90 million in assistance and development financing be provided to make the entertainment district arena and the parking garage happen. We've also included an addition of some road improvements that would be necessary for access to the project, ingress and egress and accessibility, because traffic will increase just by the development happening north of Rock Creek Road. And we've added in contingency and administrative costs. That's a 10% contingency, not on the $90 million in assistance development financing. That's a flat rate, no contingency, and no admin costs related to it. But there are admin costs and contingency tied to the road improvements. So that's a total added project cost amount of $102,750,000. This slide details the continuation of the original project costs from the 2006 project plan. You've seen these before. These are carryover. Again, there's a mistake on how this is displayed. Traffic and roads is its own line. That's the 850,000. That's carryover from the 2006 project plan. The lifestyle center, 8.25 million, and economic development is 4.3 million for total remaining project costs of 16.4 million. When you add that into the 102 million that I just detailed, that's a total project cost budget of $119,200,000. You might notice that sorry, these slides. You might notice that the cultural facility is not included in that list as a remaining project cost from the 2006 project plan. It is to be incorporated in the continued project. It will be in the arena. We've had good conversations with OE Foundation about incorporating a museum type facility in the arena itself. It will not be at a cost over and above the $90 million in assistance and development financing. And it'll be a great opportunity to allow the arena to be utilized and functioning and have people coming in and out and utilizing the entertainment district portions of that property, even when there is not an event at the arena. So we think that that's a fantastic solution and still meets the very strong objectives of the cultural facility component. So the structure of the sources of the incremental revenues include the creation of 2 new increment districts. So as you know, TIF2, which currently exists, would run its 25 years through 2031. This would include the developed property south of Rock Creek Road. What we're proposing is the establishment of a new TIF called Increment District Number 4 that would include the property north of Rock Creek Road, except for TIF 5, which we'll talk about here in a minute, and include the undeveloped property south of Rock Creek Road. That allows for the ability to capture those incremental revenues for a longer period to allow for the generation of project costs necessary to, the generation of increment necessary to pay the authorized project costs. That would continue it would be authorized to continue to 2043. It would terminate on its own upon the payment of project costs. TIF 5 is inclusive of the entertainment district, arena, and the parking garage. We are recommending that it be authorized in this amended project plan, but delay the establishment of it until a later date, which is authorized by the Local Development Act. The thinking there is you trigger it at a time when you know construction is going to happen so that you can collect as much increment as possible from the significant construction that will happen in the entertainment district. This just is a visual of that, showing the carve out of the undeveloped property south of Rock Creek Road to be included in a new TIF 4, which is the outline in blue. And the highlighted area is the entertainment district, arena, and the parking garage. So we talked briefly at the beginning about the 80% allocation to the city on the front end to allow for immediate relief to the general fund. This goes into a little more detail about what we're recommending for how the allocations would be crafted. So through 2019 through 2021, 80%, it says 70 plus 10 because instead of doing the calculation of the transfer adjustment, we're recommending that it be a flat rate of 10%. So 70% goes to the general revenue fund, 10% goes to the general revenue fund to account for the historic trends of the transfer adjustment, and 20% goes to pay authorized project costs. On the ad valorem side, we're recommending a 50-50 split through 2021. And the thinking there is because, as you know, we've analyzed that project costs, if the project were left as it currently is, project costs would be paid in approximately 2021. So we want to, in fairness to the taxing jurisdictions, make sure that they're still paying up until the time that that project would be completed, the same revenue sharing that they have been. So that changes in 2022 for the ad valorems, where you can see the split would be 40% to the taxing jurisdictions and 60% to the project. This is an effort to increase revenues to the project so that this massive proposed new development can actually take place, so that enough increment is generated to actually finance this massive new project. In 2024, after the 5 years of injection as an immediate relief to the general fund, the split for the city would change: 50% to the general fund, 10% to the general fund to account for the historic trends of the transfer adjustment, and 40% to the project. The ad valorem stay 40% to them and 60% to the project. And just as a reminder, TIF2 ends in 2031. So for all of the impacted parties, there is an influx of revenue that wasn't received prior to that point. And then after TIF2 ends, we're recommending 50% to the city's general fund, 50% to the project, and maintain that 40-60% between the ad valorems and the project. This is an effort to make sure that enough revenues are generated to fund this new large-scale development. And at the end of the day, the contribution to the project costs would be 59% of project costs paid by the city's sales tax, and 41% by ad valorem increment. So we've been working with the city's financial advisors to explore the financeability of this structure, and those conversations are ongoing. All accounts are that this structure, though there are nuances to work out, can work to make sure that the entertainment district, including the arena and the parking garage, can move forward. So if the city council decides that that's its objective, we believe that this structure can allow that to happen. It completes the original project goals, including the cultural facility within the arena, which I think is a good solution to a very worthwhile project objective from back in 2006. You know, the goal with the cultural facility was to bring people to the area to do something other than just shop. And we think that this meets two objectives. It energizes the arena on days when there aren't events, and it brings people for a reason that doesn't currently exist in this area. So we consider it a real draw, and one that can only benefit the retail shopping to the south. It maximizes returns to the city, evidenced by the first 5 years, and also to the taxing jurisdictions, evidenced by the large return that they will receive from this public investment. Particularly with the Norman Public Schools, the direct flow of increment to their coffers is unparalleled. We also believe that the RTKL master plan provides for maximizing the opportunity for Norman Forward funds. If this project is built out, we're projecting over $22 million in Norman Forward funds. That can help fund large projects on the North Base. You all know that we have some work to do there, but moving forward with this project and finding a financing commitment to provide immediate financing of the senior center is a real possibility. So should the council decide to move forward, next we would get the review committee back together to talk about this amended structure. They are charged with commenting on eligibility, financial impacts to taxing jurisdictions and the businesses, and a thumbs up or thumbs down recommendation to the project. Planning Commission would consider the PUD amendment and conformance with the amended project plan to the master plan. And then we would come back before you for 2 public hearings and a vote on an ordinance. So we believe that the project holds a lot of promise. We believe that we've met the objectives that have been stated to us. Again, the 3 key ones in my mind are immediate relief to the general funds, making sure that the project is one that can be financed, and condensing the project costs in a way that can still allow the city to meet its objectives, but narrow it to a point where it's not too all-encompassing. So I understand that questions will be at the end. That's all I have for my presentation.
Thank you, Emily. I think the next presenter is Jeff.
Good evening,
Gunning.
Mayor, members of City Council. Good to be back with you. My name is Jeff Gunning. I'm with Callison RTKL in Dallas, and I'm here to provide some updates and enhancements to the master plan. But before I do that, let me just sort of remind you of some of the attributes of the plan that we've built into it. I'm going to skip ahead to the plan itself. And we all know where this project is, but central to the value of this land and this master plan is its location along I-35 and the frontage there, which gives us the ability to create this regional draw with the arena and to build a community around that. So worth mentioning again. And this is the master plan. So what we've created here is a master plan that we think brings a very unique mixed-use approach to Oklahoma. It's built on our experience with similar kinds of community creation in other places around the U.S., and it's really about town planning. It's about blending uses together to create this sort of live, work, play, walkable street with public space, green space, plazas, to create what would be really something that's unique to Oklahoma. Norman, being the third largest city in the state, we think is the perfect place to sort of present this to the state. And we all know that too many young people are leaving Norman for Dallas and Oklahoma City and other places. So we think this sort of innovative place will attract businesses and ambitious, young, talented people who will stay in Norman and want to live in this sort of mixed-use community. So the plan is characterized by walkability, social interaction, and a sense of community. And those are really central to this sort of success formula and what makes these kinds of projects work. This is a living document, so it's a conceptual framework that it'll form the basis for development in the future, and it'll be influenced by master developer that would come on board to develop that, to develop the project. But the basic configuration and the design principles are really the strength of this plan, and we think they will optimize the chance for commercial success as it's implemented to become a community. So let me just... So we've done a couple of things with this plan. You'll notice the Expo Center, which is here. I can get that to move over here. The Expo Center before was here on this corner, and we've taken the uses off of the NEDC land, not wanting to presume any particular use would end up there, but we want to work with them on creating a configuration of uses there where everybody wins. But there were some positive things that sort of came out of that. We've located the Expo Center now just near the hotel, the Embassy Suites Hotel. It's a logical place, but frankly, we still want to look at the final location for that. But for now, that seemed like a more logical place to show it for the time being until we get more hotel developer input. The other benefit of, as we looked at the NEDC land, is that we were able to move the senior living, trying to find my cursor here, able to move the senior living to a point where it's more directly across from the entertainment district. So I think the ability for seniors living there to walk across 24th at a light, get into the mix of restaurants and so forth, and on the sidewalks, that's an even better relationship. So that was sort of a happy result of kind of moving things around. We adjusted the multifamily a little bit and moved it to the north some, so that we could provide the same number of units that we were providing before. And then all the green space that ties it together remained essentially the same. So that's an enhancement. You see the ME facility there, the existing high-tech manufacturing. An important dynamic of this plan is that when you combine walkable streets and this sort of residential, the entertainment district, we think that's going to attract businesses and more high-tech, so that there's sort of an innovation hub aspect of this project that we think it's that dynamic of all the uses together that really creates that opportunity. So that's important to remind you of. We have had a review and work session with the Institute for Quality Communities, which is within the College of Architecture at OU, where I'm on the professional advisory board. We met with Hans Butzer, who's a friend, and he offered some good advice and has offered to continue to offer advice along the way. So we wanted to get all the local expertise that we could from within the architecture school. We are connecting to the trail system, and this is just one of many ways that we want to sort of make sure this project is connected as much as possible into the rest of the community. This project may be a good candidate for what's called LEED ND. So LEED is Leadership in Energy and Environmental Design, and ND is Neighborhood Development. So the plan already conforms to several of those requirements: connection to civic and public spaces, mix of uses, the tree-lined streets, bike and transit connections. So we want to continue to develop that because that's just another aspect of creating an innovative community that attracts the right kind of businesses and the right kind of residents. This is the enlarged plan of the existing project south of Rock Creek. So you see the Expo Center there, at a little larger scale, and then the plan where you see the NEDC land highlighted, and then each of the uses. We've done some more thinking about the what's called new urbanist community there. That is something that we think would be very different from any type of residential that's currently offered in Norman. And I'll show you some examples of that. But the idea is that it's more of a sort of a walkable community with a lot of emphasis on sidewalks and short front yards. The houses are very close to each other, maybe even zero lot line. So we think that could be something that would attract professors, students, or maybe not so much students, but recent graduates, young families, and so forth, and be something that would be a positive addition to the housing stock that's in Norman. So these are some examples of the residential that we're talking about. So Addison Circle is a project of ours in the Dallas area that's widely recognized as one of the most successful new urbanist communities that has been created. We started that project in the late 1990s, and it continues to grow. The images in the middle are both from Stapleton, which is a mixed-use master plan community near Denver on the side of the old Stapleton Airport. That's the sort of close housing type that we see in what we're calling this new urbanist community. And then the image on the right is also Addison Circle. So the multifamily is in many ways a continuation of the multifamily that's recently been completed there, with the buildings up close to the street. All the units either face onto the street or into an internalized courtyard. So multifamily is, we think, sort of what's on the leading edge of that type of development today, as well as what we're showing as new urbanist community, which is more of a single family typology. We mentioned the Expo Center. These are just examples. I think these were in our presentation last time of various Expo Centers around the world and things we could be inspired by. And then these are enlargements that show each use. So we have the multipurpose arena, and as I mentioned last time, that's been designed with sort of the desires of the athletic department in mind. That's sort of their wish list of the right number of seats and boxes and so forth. That also serves as a concert venue and would allow for it to be used for as many nights as possible, which of course is a benefit to the project and to the city. And so that's the arena. Some examples of other arenas. The hotel, you see the Virgin Hotel study is one that we did up in Nashville. The Stella is a hotel in College Station that opened recently. That's a similar scale to what we'd like to attract here. Offices, the offices are sort of on the opposite side, on the north side of the parking structure, so they would get that use, and the parking structure is shared by the arena. And the events plaza, we think is really important. This becomes kind of the heart of the community, where they would have yoga on Saturday mornings and things during the week, as well as become alive and very animated on nights where there's an event happening at the arena. And the mixed use, that's referred to mixed use because we'd like to do office, sort of creative class office that happens up above the restaurants and bars and so forth that happen along the streets. So it gives a sense of scale, and also creates this more sort of a downtown feeling, and again, another use that fits into the mixed use formula that makes these types of projects work. And then the renderings, you recall, you see the hotel in the background there. A lot of emphasis on walkability and dining that spills out onto the streets, landscaping, parking on the street, as well as parking in larger parking fields that happen behind the buildings. And this is shown as though it's a day where they might have had a farmer's market or something on a Saturday, maybe close off one of the streets. And then the outdoor dining that is really kind of the linchpin of this development, and the type of environment that we think we could create, that is another aspect to make this unique and attractive to people, residents and to new residents. And then, as you recall, we took some time to sort of think about the arena and its use. We talk a lot about game day and every day. So game day is important, but every day is important as well. So that plaza needs to be designed in such a way that it's a nice place to be on any morning and not just on a Saturday night when there's a game going on. So this shows if it were decorated for Norman High School events, and then we think it's a regional tournament destination for NCAA. And then, of course, days when it's OU basketball or other sports. And then every day that, as I mentioned, this needs to be a great place to live near and not just be centered on game days. So a lot of benefits to Norman, a lot of new residents. It's that regional draw that we think is really important, was part of the original plan for the whole development. New hotel, 15 acres of parks and open space, a lot of opportunity to attract new businesses and high quality workers, connect with the bike and pedestrian trails. Walkable is very key, and the Expo Center. And then we have looked, I didn't point that out, we've looked at preliminary enhancements to improve traffic. And so we have some preliminary advice on that, and there'll be a more definitive traffic study that happens later. And then, of course, the new dining options that kind of form the heart of this new development near the arena. So that's my presentation.
Thank you. Jay Leinhardt.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. My name is Jay Linhart, and I'm with a company called Convention Sports and Leisure. And we were hired by the OU Foundation to conduct a feasibility study on the arena portion of the master plan. But we also considered the vision of the master plan and timeframe for development and the overall feasibility of the arena process. And so just a little history about our firm. We've been in business for about 30 years, conducting market and financial feasibility studies for stadiums, arenas, ballparks, convention centers, and tourist type attractions. We've done about 2,000 studies over the course of that time frame, and I would guess around 30 to 40% of the time projects move forward and actually get built. The remainder of the time, they don't get financed or the decision's made not to build them. And so our experience in Oklahoma, a lot of projects that we've studied over time, about 15 or 20 over the last 22 years. Several of them have been built. Some of them include our market research that we did on the South End Zone project for the football stadium here in Norman. We also did all of the feasibility planning for the relocation of the Supersonics and all the improvements that were made to what at the time was the Ford Center. We also did, on behalf of Tulsa, a master plan of public assembly facilities about 15, 20 years ago that resulted in them building the BOK Center and One OK Park and several other facilities we looked at that they didn't wind up building. So for us, again, our focus was on the arena piece. We did do a study in 2015 for Cleveland County that looked at a 10,000 seat arena. At the time we did the study, it was much more closer to the Embassy Suites and wasn't part of a larger vision like there is for the northern parcels of the master plan. And so that was kind of the difference in the context 3 years later when we were asked by the foundation to update that study and consider the impacts of this vision and what it means to the overall arena feasibility. And so before we get into the results of the study, just want to talk a little bit about trends nationally as it relates to the development of sports facilities. And you're seeing more and more of them being anchored by entertainment districts to create a destination. And so you see here examples from large markets like Los Angeles and Dallas to smaller markets like Allentown, Pennsylvania. There's examples of developments that happen all at once. So for example, the image in the middle at the top in Ottawa was a renovation of a stadium and arena, and a bunch of retail and office was all done in the same 2-year time period in terms of development. Then you have other examples like in Dallas with the American Airlines Center, where that development happened over the course of 8 to 10 to 15 years more organically. Couple of good case studies as you look at this. Bottom right-hand corner, Augusta, Georgia is a new ballpark that opened up this year. Oftentimes we get questions from people that sit in your position, you know, how can you hold a developer accountable or guarantee the development will happen? And so in Augusta, they developed what they called a municipal improvement district that assessed the developer a fee based on the projections that they agreed to when the project was agreed to, that there was a certain level of incremental property tax that was being used to fund the project. And to the extent that the developer had not developed the real estate around it to meet those projections, he was required to fill the gap. So that might be something that you look at here in order to protect the public sector is what kind of measures can you help? Because a lot of the viability as we talk about this will depend on the overall vision and development beyond just the arena. A couple of other case studies, one that's referenced a lot in the people that we talked to during the development of our feasibility study is the Pinnacle Bank Arena in Lincoln, Nebraska. Similarities in that it's a partnership between the city and the University of Nebraska. The building is owned by a joint venture entity called the Haymarket Public Agency that has both representation from the university and the city. Unlike the plan that we will talk about today, this was a 100% publicly financed building. The city elected to increase their hotel tax rate, their car rental tax rate, and a restaurant tax to build about 184,000, 16,000 seat arena, plus invest in public infrastructure in a Haymarket district, which has seen about $300 or $400 million in private development since the development of the arena. Another example is CFE Arena. It's called in Orlando, Florida. It's about a 10-minute walk from the center of campus for Central Florida University. They wanted to build a 10,000 seat arena a little over a decade ago, and the price then was about $100 million for the arena. And going through a feasibility process much like this, they realized that the economics of the arena itself weren't sufficient enough to pay the $100 million. They took a step back and looked at how they could develop the entire area. And so what they did is they developed 4 dorm towers you see there that host 2,000 students, about 180,000 square feet of retail. After the dorm pays its debt and pays its operating costs, it kicks off about $4.5 million a year that are used to help service the arena bonds. And the retail leases kick off about another $500,000. So about $5 million a year is being provided from the economics of the housing and the retail, and the remainder of the economics are self-generated through the arena in order to pay their bills. And the last example before we jump into the specifics of this project is the Ford Center at the Star. This is an example of a public-private joint venture where the school district, the city, and a professional team came together to develop a 12,000-seat indoor stadium on a 90-acre campus that also includes office space, a 300-room hotel, and about 25 restaurants. And so as they talked about the importance of the plaza space, you see that top middle picture, that plaza is activated almost every day of the year in some form or fashion with events, whether it's watching parties for games that are out of town. They can close it off and ticket and bring in food trucks. They had a boxing match that was televised nationally on ESPN. Just a variety of different events that can happen there as well. So talking about the feasibility study itself, our focus was really on determining market demand for the arena. Based on that demand, what's the appropriate building program in terms of the size of the arena, its amenities, and what would that cost to build? Looking at the appropriate ownership and operating structure, looking at financial projections to understand if the arena can be self-sustainable and over a period of time. And then we came up with a conceptual funding plan that we'll talk about today. That's really step one in terms of bringing the parties together. The details need to be worked out, but I think it gives a good starting point about how this project potentially can be feasible. And then we've done our estimates of economic impact. I know Dr. Daravi or Dr. Doffenbach will talk more specifically about that as well. So through our study process, talking to potential event promoters that would bring events to the facility, looking at the history of arenas in this market and markets comparable to Oklahoma City and Norman. And so you'll see here 6 peer arenas that we identified, and I've protected their information because it was given to us in a confidential manner, but they were markets in Austin, Allentown, Cincinnati, Norfolk, Orlando, and St. Louis. And these are buildings that are really secondary buildings to a major building in most of those markets. So in a lot of cases, there could be a larger NBA or NHL building in the market or a larger public assembly building in the market. So we projected event levels of about 160 events for this facility. And part of that is driven by the district itself in order to activate the plaza and hold ticketed events and those kinds of things, whether it's a concert or a boxing event out on the plaza, allows this arena to do more events than it would be if it was a standalone arena. And so we're projecting about 160 events and about 480,000 attendees. And our attendance projection is slightly above most of the peers based on the strength of demand for OU basketball relative to some of the tenants in these other buildings that were minor league tenants that draw at a much lower level. We also looked at the mix of events that could be programmed in the facility. And so on the left-hand side, of the 480,000 attendees we expect to come to the arena on an annual basis, it shows you kind of the breakdown of by event type. And so why men's and women's basketball would be the primary tenant. They make up about 44% of the overall attendance, but the majority of attendance is coming from a variety of other events, whether it's concerts, family shows, motorsports, graduations, consumer trade shows, those types of things. And then we also looked at the split of resident versus non-resident potential related to this facility. A lot of this is based on zip code reports of actual attendees to men's and women's basketball game for the Sooners. Also working with concert promoters and getting zip code reports for other concerts that have been held here in the Oklahoma City area to really understand the drawing power of these events and where they might come from. And on an overall basis, we expect that 80% of the people that would come to the arena would be residents outside of the city of Norman. And just to give you a little bit of perspective, Norman's population is a little bit over 100,000, about 120, 130,000. Metro area population is about 1.4 million. So that's less than 10% of the overall metro area, to give it some context. The arena building program, so 10,000 seats for basketball, but that building program and the capacity morphs depending on what type of event it's configured for. So if you were to set up an in-stage concert where you lose seats on one end of the arena, capacity gets reduced to about 8,000. Or if you did a center stage configuration where you added chairs on the floor, the building could do up to 12,000 in that type of environment. The premium seating program very closely matches what was in the master plan building program. Total building size about 300,000 square feet. And so in terms of costs, what we did is we looked at the cost to build these 6 other arenas, historical as-built costs, adjusted them for time and place to Norman to estimate potential construction costs here. And so we estimate the arena with about 300,000 square feet would just be a shade over $130 million. The parking structure, because it's part of a mixed-use development, we're assuming structured parking versus surface parking. So pretty sizable investment in parking in order to make that work with the rest of the development and make it walkable. Total project cost for the arena and the parking with some other costs is about $195 million. So the conceptual arena funding plan that we've put together, and again, it's a starting point, I think, for all parties. When we talk about parties, we're talking about the city, we're talking about the foundation, we're talking about the university and the private developers. Kind of in that range of roughly half of the project cost, $80 to $90 million coming from the TIF, a developer contribution as it relates to some of the shared infrastructure. And this is kind of where it gets into the feasibility component of the arena, determining the amount of debt the arena economics could support. We're estimating that to be about $47 million with some other fundraising through premium seat sales. So when you look at that funding pie on an overall basis, about 41% of the revenue or funding sources are coming from public sector funding sources and about 59% from private sector funding sources. And so what we did is on the right-hand side of this page is we looked at 35 other community arenas that have been built over the last 10 to 15 years and looked at how they were funded and ranked this from high to low in terms of public funding to more private funding. And so as you see there, this conceptual funding plan is involves the third most private funding percentage of these 35 arenas that have built in other communities. And it can do that because of its relationship to the mixed use development and the synergies that are created with that. So as we talk about that funding plan, we had about $47 million that could be funded through the arena economics. And so what we did is we looked at that $47 million. Debt term would be about $2.9 million a year if you looked at a 30-year bond at 4.5% interest. And so typically when you do a project like this, if it relies on the revenues that are generated through a venue, what bankers most like to look at are what they call contractually obligated income. And those are the revenue sources in an arena that are based on 3-year, 5-year, 10-year, up to 20 or 30-year agreements, especially when you're talking about naming rights or lease agreements with your tenants, premium seating and those kinds of things. And so we pull those revenue streams into the funding plan and generate a coverage of almost 2.0 times the debt, 1.8 times the debt, increasing to about 2.3. And the reason that increases is that we're assuming full development of the entertainment district doesn't happen until years 4 and 5 of the arena operations. And then, so there's about $2 million left over after debt coverage. And this is, again, important why, as we look at the viability of this arena and how its relationship to the entertainment district, one of the important revenue streams is the entertainment district sponsorship. So conceiving the idea of this is not just an arena, but it's a entertainment district. There are examples, whether it's the Star that I've talked about in Frisco, there's a new Toyota Music Pavilion in Irving that has 25 restaurants around an outdoor amphitheater. But if you design it in a manner where there's digital signage throughout, you coordinate your sponsorships, maybe you have one pouring right sponsor for all of the restaurants and the arena, having signage out on the interstate in terms of a marquee, that we think there's a lot of value that the district itself from a corporate sponsorship standpoint can drive to this project. And so you'll see a number there, the third one down, that draws some real value to this project. So based on that, we developed an arena pro forma based on the market research and the performance of other arenas and other markets and the specific plan here. Overall, generating an operating income of roughly $140,000 after paying property taxes, after paying a capital reserve to save for the future in terms of reinvestment back in the building. And that grows to about $1.3 million in a stabilized 5th year of operations once that full entertainment district is developed and the value is there. And so you can kind of see if you developed an arena on a standalone basis, it's difficult to make it work. But with a vision like this and the ability to capture additional revenue streams through a larger vision for the arena is what, in this particular case, helps this project become feasible. In terms of arena serving as a catalyst, we talked about 480,000 expected attendees to the arena itself. When you look at the entire master plan and the plan for absorption of the different elements, whether it's the entertainment district, residential, or housing, there's an opportunity to draw another 2.5 million visits to the site on an annual basis. So that comprises about 3 million annual visitors to the site, whether that's those coming for restaurants, arena, the residents who live there, et cetera. And so you can see how the arena itself draws or multiplies the benefit of the entire TIF district by being the anchor that starts the rest of the development. And so we did our own economic and fiscal impact analysis. I know Dr. Doffenbach will come up here and speak about his own numbers, but I think the long and short of it is we've both done 2 separate studies as it relates to economic impact. And when you look at our results, they're within plus or minus 7 or 8%, or a little bit more conservative. I think he has some different assumptions in terms of the master plan absorption. But when you look at these numbers on a total basis, when you look at both the arena and the ancillary development over a 30-year period, which is what we typically look at as a useful life of an arena, so kind of your investment horizon, about $2.1 billion in spending. So that includes direct spending, but also the re-spending that occurs in the economy. About supporting 1,200 full and part-time jobs. That's in a full-time equivalent number. And about $275 million in tax revenues. So if you were to divide that by the 30 years, roughly almost about $9 or $10 million a year on average in terms of incremental tax revenues. So overall, the key study conclusions that we came away with is the arena can serve as catalyst for starting the development, private investment of $500 million in the mixed-use development. We do believe it will attract visitors and residents to Norman based on the experiences of other similar projects across the country. At least the conceptual plan that we've put together as a part of this feasibility study requires less public investment as a percentage of the overall cost than the vast majority of other community arenas that have been developed. The funding plan doesn't rely on increases or a new tax in order to help fund it. There's positive public sector benefits for every dollar invested that the city would put in. If you assumed $80 million, that would be about $3.5 in return for each dollar invested as it relates to the economic impact. And that with the appropriate structure and the right partners and how you set up the arena, it can be financially sustainable. That once you build it and open it and operate it, that it can sustain itself, generate more revenues than expenses. And the way this is envisioned, it would be owned by an authority or a 501c3 and operated by private management. So the city would not have any operating risk on an annual basis that relates to the operations of the venue. So that concludes my presentation. I think
Thank you, Jeff.
Dr. Doffenbach is next.
All right, MC, I'm got it up there. Thank you. It's very much a pleasure to be with you today and offer you an official copy of the report that I've written, doing analysis on basically the tax revenues, largely focused on that of both the sales tax and the property tax nature, not so much the jobs impact, which Mr. Chappie will be speaking to just shortly after my presentation here today. And what we had in the earlier TIF study was a study performed by Professor Lex Holmes that served as the basis for my doing this study. So I had a model, so to speak, to draw from in doing this particular analysis. I've concentrated on property values, how those would be increased over time as a consequence of this 10-year development, and putting some inflation factor on it at 2%. Lex used a 3% at the time he was doing his. And looking at the new hotels that are anticipated, Expo Center, Arena, the entertainment district that is, and dining district that is being proposed. You just saw some very nice illustrations of what the possibilities will be there, and certainly looking at new residential construction and spending on the part of inhabitants of those new housing units. So I implemented this all in a spreadsheet model. It's all very detailed, all the different classes of properties that are going into effect, along with the expected sales that would be associated with each of the various types. And so it's there for review and inspection for anybody that wants to get into the bowels of that type of analysis. And in fact, what was very unique about this study was that I was able to ground the parameters of the studies in many of the historic, it doesn't go back very far, of course, the TIF district, but I relied on a lot of TIF district data informing parameters for the study. And in fact, it's one of the rare instances where you have a whole lot of empirical information to go on in doing the analysis. And so the existing North Park development provided a lot of fodder for my design of this study. So ultimately, I see at the end of a 10-year development period, including inflation, I see us at a total of $21.1 million. And the various components of that you see there. Property tax, as Ms. Pomeroy was indicating, is a very hefty share of the revenues that we expect from the area. And the bottom line is certainly a significant amount of new revenue that it would be available for the state for the location of new supportive schooling and housing in the area. Now, I'd like to just spend a minute talking about what kind of town, what kind of city Norman is in its experiences and how it shows Norman to be a true retail trade center of the region. And what we have up here is indications of resident population, and I include more in Oklahoma City and the state for comparison purposes. And we see, for example, that in this last 1.5 decades, Moore has had considerable growth, but they're still only about half the size of Norman in terms of population. And furthermore, we see that Oklahoma City and Norman's population growth rates have been right on top of one another and considerably higher than the growth rates associated with the state as a whole. So we're in distinctly to illustrate the centrality of Norman as a retail center is to prepare inflation-adjusted retail sales data. Now, this is not taxable sales data. This isn't your whole tax base. This is data that relates specifically to retail sales. And what we see there is inflation-adjusted, seasonal, moving average trend data that allows us to examine what the trends have been and how sizable Norman is as a residential entity in retail trade. And what we see here in the inflation-adjusted retail sales per person, that Norman today is at $13,000 per person, compared to a state average of $9,500. And in comparison to about $11,500 for Oklahoma City, and rising rapidly because of all of their attention to retail trade, has been the city of Moore. Growing very rapidly. If you've been down 19th Street lately, you understand what I mean. And so here's graphically how these differentials show up and how sizable Norman's advantage is and how primed we are for continuing our momentum as a retail center. Here's a graphic that shows Moore on the bottom. The red is Norman's growth rate. And you can see through this that about the time we started the TIF district, we had really flattened out in real growth. And it wasn't really until 2012, 13, when the TIF district, when University North Park really took off, that we saw sizable growth. Since then, we've seen some tapering off of real expenditures. And we all know that there are national disruptions going on in retail trade, the Amazon effect. Now, I have data to analyze this more deeply to see just where what's been associated with these declines, looking at specific industries, even down to lumber yards. So that's something I'll expect in the future. But my point is, here you have Norman on the upper left. Many cities in the state have not experienced growth in retail sales, real retail sales, adjusted for inflation. And we've been very fortunate to be in this part of the state and can hope that we'll see continuing progress in the future. So these slides will be available to you, I'm sure. Right, Chip? Yeah.
Thank you.
Madam Mayor, honorable council members, thank you for your time this evening. My name is John Chappie. I'm the Director of Research and Economic Analysis at the Oklahoma Department of Commerce. My part in this was to supplement Dr. Doffenbach's economic impact report and provide an economic impact of the jobs created, the 650 projected jobs created in retail establishments associated with the projected University of North Park development, and 1,100 high-tech and office and manufacturing jobs projected to be created at the proposed development. To do this, I used an in-plan model to simulate the economic impacts of those jobs. And if you're familiar with the in-plan model, there's over 500 industries that are accounted for. So part of my work was to identify industries that would be a part of the University of North Park plan. And the 650 jobs that are the retail jobs, that includes 86 jobs that were input into the model as a hotel development. And those jobs are based off of space requirements identified by the Energy Information Administration for lodging establishments. The remainder of the retail jobs, 534, I believe it was, were split between retail establishments and restaurants. Of those, 328 were in five retail industries, and 236 of those jobs were in restaurants such as limited use restaurants, limited seating restaurants, and full service restaurants. The 1,100 jobs in the high-tech office and manufacturing industries were based off of projects that the City of Norman Economic Development has competed for over the past 3 to 5 years. Those industries include custom computer programming, computer design services, diagnostic manufacturing products, and other industries that were in the professional services or higher tech manufacturing industries. Those 1,100 jobs are, I think, reasonable. The projects that the Norman competed for were in those projects the past 3 to 5 years represented over 2,000 jobs, requiring about 66 acres of land. And so the high-tech industrial office and industrial manufacturing input into the model, there's 93 acres, I believe, available for that land use. And so given that what was actually competed for in the City of Norman was much higher than what was input in the model, I believe that the 1,100 job estimate was a conservative estimate. So in total, there were 1,750 jobs that were input into an economic impact model. The results of those were in the supplement that were sent. And from those, I utilized, again, the in-plan model and a similar methodology as Dr. Doffenbach to estimate the sales and property tax impacts upon the City of Norman and Cleveland County, focusing on the retail impacts. Those impacts for the direct jobs created in the retail sector were about $186,000 after 10 years. The induced and indirect property taxes were estimated as $218,000 for a total impact associated with the retail projects of $404,000. So retail sales, hospitality industries, as you're probably well aware, a little bit lower impacts than other industries. However, for live, work, play development, they are vital to the overall success of the project. This type of project is not something that we've seen in the state of Oklahoma, and in fact is something that site location consultants have been telling us recently that companies that they're representing are looking for. So moving on to the high-tech industrial and office space, the jobs associated with those are projected to generate about $1 million in sales taxes and $1.1 million in property taxes associated with those jobs. And for a total impact of $2.1 million. So again, my part of the study was to supplement Dr. Doffenbach's. It does not include any of the arena impacts that were previously presented. And that's all I have. If you have any questions, I'm
Thank you.
happy to answer.
Final speaker. You're done. Are you going to say anything about the possible amendment? Okay. Ms. Pomeroy, do you have any closing comments you want to make? Okay. All right. This would be time for the council to ask questions. Councilmember Castleberry.
I guess this will be for the CSL representatives. Could you talk a little bit more about the 80% of how you came up with the 80% of non-residents that would utilize this area by the zip codes? Were those zip codes in the current area or projects, just methodology a little bit more where we can, you said use zip code analysis on the 80%, if you could expand on that.
Okay. It's a combination of factors, mainly informed by the historical zip code reports from the university's basketball ticket sales, understanding where people came from. We also have relationships with concert promoters that track ticket sales, and we can download reports that give you ticket sales by zip code for concerts that were hosted in the metro area. And so I think it probably helps a little bit to also understand what we define as the primary market for this arena. I would say the majority of event attendance, probably in the neighborhood of 50 to 60% for most events. There'll be some differences depending on the demand for the event, whether it's a high profile concert versus more of a localized family show. But 50 to 60% of the attendance typically comes from within a metro area, within probably a 20 to 30 minute drive. And then the remainder comes, we think in this market, it might be a little bit more than other markets, given there's really only two major cities and metro areas in Oklahoma, but up to a 2-hour drive time for some of the biggest concerts that could come into the facility itself. And so looking at the primary market, the secondary market, historical zip code reports helped inform those numbers, and it'll vary by event. So basketball may be different from a concert, different from a high school graduation.
Could you talk a little bit about, do you have any, I guess, analysis of how your projections have panned out? I mean, I don't want to go 10 years back. That's too far.
Right.
But any recent projects you've done recently that we went back and measured what your projections were and how accurate they were?
Well, we
An
do
example or
that from time to time, and I think a really good one is Colorado State University. We did a feasibility study for them to bring football back to campus, and they spent a little over $200 million on a new 35,000 seat stadium. Very public process, and they have tracked through time where our feasibility projections were, as well as the actual operations of the building. It just opened up last year, so it's got 1 year of operating history so far. So it has a side-by-side comparisons of our projections to the actuals, and they were exceeded ours, but were within plus or minus 5% of where we projected. And that's available online if you want to go look.
Okay. You also mentioned you had done about 2,000 these type of studies, and about 30% of them didn't get done either from financing or something like that. Have you done some studies where your conclusion was, don't do this?
Absolutely. Just to correct that percentage, 30 to 40% actually happen.
Okay, I'm sorry.
It's really 60 to 70% don't happen.
Yeah, don't have, okay.
So that happens all the time.
Okay. Thank you.
The reality is one community or one stakeholder's definition of feasibility is different from another. So as a city council member, your definition may be property tax and incremental sales tax. And what do we have to invest in order to realize that? And does that make sense for us? Oftentimes when you build a convention center, it's not about the facility itself making money. It's about heads and beds and economic impact. We also have lots of clients that are professional team owners or private developers, and their definition of feasibility is, do I make enough revenue to pay for the project cost and the operations and have a return for the risks that I took? And so it just depends from project to project.
I guess last question. Have you ever been on the other side, like for a bank or investors, to see if somebody brings a deal to you and you're looking to see if it makes sense, I guess from a banking standpoint, where you
Yes,
get hired by a
we-
bank to make sure these numbers are jive or anything like that? Or you always been on the other side where you're trying to get the bank to loan you money?
Not on the other side. We work on behalf of investment banks. So we work with Goldman Sachs, Bank of America, M&T Bank on projects where they are looking to finance it, but need an independent feasibility study to determine whether they want to commit funds to it. And so there's been examples where they brought us in and they didn't wind up financing it. And there's some that our studies are included in the bond circular document that's a public document. So it's what investors look at and make decisions to buy the bonds.
Okay, thank you.
Jay, before you sit down, my questions kind of go along with Councilmember Castleberry's, but you gave us a list of 35 different arenas, and they were very different. Some of them were pro, some of them were community, so they were all very different. If you were looking at those 35, could you tell me, if I asked the mayor of each one of those towns, what percentage of the mayors do you think would say this has been a really successful project for my city?
That would be a good question. I would have to, it would be speculation, but I did want to correct you. None of those were professional arenas. They were purposely arenas that were not on a college campus and not an NBA or an NHL type of arena. So
Okay,
it's
more
really-
like ours then.
Yes, more
I
like
thought a couple of them were.
You know, that's a good question. And what I would encourage this council to do is to look at, especially some of the projects that we've talked about, is to find communities like yours where they've done it before and ask them those questions. I would say that the tendency is the ones that had a development vision and were more than just an arena, you're going to get a lot more positive response, especially if that has helped revitalize the economic area and as well as the city's finances. But it's a great question, and I don't know the answer to that one.
Okay,
Yeah.
we'll be looking into that. Thank you very
Yep.
much. Any other questions for Jay while he's up? Councilmember Hickman.
I'm not really sure who the question is for. And I have a lot of them, so I'm not sure how many I'll get through. But one of my, I guess, comments or questions is with regard to an independent economic analysis. I've gone back and looked at my notes on October 12th, 2017. In the Finance Committee, I asked if the city would conduct an independent economic analysis. In an email on October 22nd, I made that request again, and Councilmember Clark followed up on that on December 1st. And on another email, January 17th, 2018, I made another request. None of those emails have been responded to, and I don't know the status if we're going to have an independent economic analysis done by the city or not, and I'm curious if staff has an opinion about that. And I ask that in part because I see some of my Campus Corner merchants here and downtown merchants here, and I've heard concerns about cannibalization. And I don't know the answer to that question. I'm not an economist. I'm trying to make an informed decision, and I hear the reports from Doffenbach and others, and so I'm just wondering, are we going to do an independent report? Can we have a point in time where we have a discussion about could there be potential effects on other parts of this community that happen to be in Ward 4 that I'm listening to, those folks? And is there anybody here who has done that study and can start the discussion about it tonight?
Mr. Hickman, I'm not sure that I could answer the question in terms of the start the discussion tonight, but I think from a staff perspective, we very much believe that an independent third-party analysis should take place. There are a number of firms around the country that do that. You heard just some of the testimony tonight where this company looked at it from a different perspective, but we very much believe that that should be done if this project is to advance forward. As has been discussed tonight, this project is really kind of beginning in its infancy, if you will, in terms of a major public discussion. But I believe for it to go forward, and the council wants to advance this project, it very much should engage a qualified firm to do that.
And what would be the steps and process in which to complete that? I guess I'm just wondering because my requests, and I don't know about others, go back to October of last year and January of this year. And so we're now in May, and I'm just wondering, why haven't we done it to now? And I guess what is it going to take to get that done? And how does that relate to the work that Emily's been doing for us?
Well, I think that as I said, there are firms around the country that do this. This work has been done by our development council, but there are professional people that are trained economists that do that. I guess from the staff's perspective, we are waiting to see if the council believes they want to advance this project. And if so, just some direction from the council to do that. And then we could set in order that process. We can get those things moving. We've had some preliminary discussion at the staff level with respect to some firms that we think that are qualified to do this. And if the council would like us to move forward, if they think the time is right, we will do so and try to have that back to us as soon as possible.
I'm not sure where to go further with that, but I have some questions regarding the master plan. Yes, sir. And I know I've had some conversations, I think, with local council about this. I just want to make sure that as you guys are working on the master plan, that you're cognizant that the Bishop Creek watershed that this area would encompass, where the arena would go, is at almost a 42% impervious surface area right now. And the other watershed that flows into this area is the Merkle Creek, which is at 41%. And those are high percentages. Only Imhoff Creek is at a higher percentage in this community. And some of us have talked about you guys having and utilizing low impact development initiatives in how you're doing this project, so that we can both clean the stormwater that goes into these creeks and try to reduce the flow of the stormwater going to those creeks. The city has already spent millions of dollars making improvements on Bishop Creek downstream from this area, both at Main Street and at the Havenbrook crossings. And so is this something that you guys have considered or discussed in your master plan development and that you can take into consideration as we move forward?
We haven't discussed it in detail, but we realize it's an important issue. And so as we get further down the road with civil engineers who will help us analyze all that, that's certainly something we need to address.
Okay. Well, I would certainly encourage you guys to do that. And it's something I think that is important to a lot of the citizens in our community. And from our historical perspective as a city, we didn't have these conversations when we developed upstream in Imhoff Creek in this community, and it's now a disaster. And we have millions of dollars of unfunded infrastructure needs. And I'm trying to think step ahead, if you will, so that we don't have those same kind of problems in Brookhaven Creek and Merkle Creek. And we do already have folks in this room that have had homes and flooding on Merkle Creek. So we have issues like that in this town. And I hope that that's something you guys will take into account is stormwater needs.
Okay.
With regard to the master plan, I also had some questions about, I didn't notice a lot of changes from your master plan from September, which is the last public meeting that I've participated in these discussions. And I think at that time, me and others made comments about the percentage of your park space, green space. Based on my calculations, it came out to be about, I don't know if I have it right here handy with me or not, but about 12% maybe, or 2, it depends on how you divide it, anywhere from 2.4 to 12%, depending upon what all acreage you included. And I would encourage you guys to take a look at your master plan and add in more green space. I'm not sure if the percentage of green space that I see currently is going to be adequate for the kind of live, work, play environment that you want and are trying to design. I don't know if you have any feelings about that, but I'd like to hear what your thoughts are on the amount of green space you have so far.
Well, the green space is part of what brings value to the whole development for people who want to live there and for businesses who want to locate there. So it's very important to get that right. I'm sure as we work with a master developer, they will have thoughts about what they think is the right formula based on their past experience. But these sort of new urbanist communities are successful because they get that formula right between green space and with the sidewalks and where the uses are located and how they're connected. So yes, we definitely want to make sure that's right. And if it needs to be more, then I'm sure our developer will encourage us to add to it.
I don't have any questions right now.
Thank you. Councilmember Coleman.
I don't think there's really enough time left until we have to start our next meeting, so I think I'll hold mine.
Okay. Other. Councilmember Allison.
This question is from Emily's presentation. On slide 12, there's a point at the bottom that says financing commitment to provide immediate financing of senior center project should lease be approved. Can you expand on that line?
So we have been working with the city's financial advisors to examine whether the Norman forward revenues are sufficient to immediately finance the senior center. And as I indicated, the Norman forward projections are very high, to the tune of over $22 million. The OU Foundation has agreed to provide a loan commitment that would allow for a bridge for the immediate financing of the senior center should the Norman forward revenues not be enough from a financing perspective to immediately make that happen. So we believe that we have before us an option that will allow for the immediate financing of the senior center. Of course, as you know, it's dependent on some additional things happening, including the approval of the lease of the property on the north base. We think that with the approval of this project, that is likely to occur. We think the OU Foundation would help communicate the importance of the approval of that lease to the Board of Regents and help us through that process. But that would be a step that would still have to take place.
Perfect. So we would have, so what you're saying is that we would have financing to start construction pretty quickly on this senior center.
Yes, so we believe that Norman Forward will be enough to finance it on its own, and the foundation, knowing the importance of this project to the community, has agreed to provide a bridge loan should the Norman Forward money not take care of the financing component.
Thank you.
Other comments? Did you need to make any comments? I want to thank everybody that came this evening. We have gotten a lot of information. I have appreciated all the information I've gotten, particularly in the last few weeks. That's something that has been very concerning. Several of us have asked about the independent financial report, and we'll expect that to be done if the council decides that we need to move forward with further considerations of this. It's been very helpful. I'm glad we had a big audience, and I want to thank everybody for coming. And I'm going to adjourn the meeting so that we can start regular council meeting.